Hey everyone, long time no talk. It's been a minute since I got on the mic, but honestly, taking the time to just enjoy these playoffs has been pretty refreshing. Fortunately for all of us, that means I've got a lot to say. I've had a few people ask me lately if I'd consider doing a podcast. Part of me thinks that'd be a lot of fun, and the rest of me feels like there's already enough options out there for people. But then again, could one more really hurt? I don't know, but it can't hurt to give it a go. So let's try that today and see how it feels. Generally, I write a script and go from there, but I'm going to freestyle this one and touch on a few different topics. Let's talk some basketball. There's nothing quite like losing a Game 7 after a miraculous comeback, with your team on the verge of making history. But that's about as on point as it gets with this team, I'd say. Alternating between greatness and unseriousness in the blink of an eye. Despite that frustrating mix, I actually enjoyed watching this team a lot. There were a lot of compelling moments, individual, team-wide stories to follow. And I know some people don't want to hear this, but being 5 wins away from a championship is still very good, and ultimately why I'm not feeling as reactionary despite the brutal loss. It's obviously upsetting, I'm disappointed myself. Who wouldn't be? But I do think things get a bit out of hand when a loss in the Eastern Conference Finals Game 7 leads to we have to blow it up. We have to trade our best players. We have to trade our core. That really just doesn't add up to me. With what we've seen, this team is knocking on the doorstep year after year, and they were this close to breaking through last year. I don't see them as a team that needs all that much more work to cross that finish line finally. There's some things I would like to explore as far as roster changes and trying to make the roster fit a bit more positionally. I'll get into that a little bit later, I suppose, with some talks about tactical changes that this coaching staff and this team can make to become more playoff oriented in their approach. It was hard to feel satisfied with what Joe Mazzulla did during this playoff run for the most part. There were moments where it looked like he had things figured out, and there were moments where he looked like a rookie. That's a tough mix because, he is a rookie. He had a skeleton crew coaching staff, and some of the decisions he made were a bit head-scratching. Others were really important, even series winning. There's no shame in being outcoached by Erik Spoelstra. I would say best coach in the league, no question right now. But there were things that really showed the signs of him being a rookie, like being too slow to get to certain adjustments that other coaches of Spoelstra's caliber would be willing to make during a game or the very next game at the least. So yeah, there were times where Joe showed his inexperience, and that was unfortunate, but I do think he has the right temperament, mindset, and ultimately I think his system is the right one for winning basketball games in this league. Of course, there are things he has to adjust, but I do think we saw him learn throughout, and I understand why that's hard for some people to accept. Truthfully, yeah, it's hard to have a rookie head coach learning on the fly in a playoff series as your team is trying to compete. That's a big deal. But I think in the grand scheme of things, if he's the guy that Brad and the organization is comfortable with moving forward, we have to accept it and allow him to have this type of learning experience. I would say that over those last 3 games, as they forced the Game 7, the confidence was restored. My belief in his ability to guide this team, to put them in the position to win basketball games, that was restored as well. I mean, like I said, he was going head-to-head against Coach Spoelstra, and that is pretty much an impossible task for any coach to win that matchup. Now, I'm not saying he won that or anything, but he made good decisions, and he felt the game pretty well in those moments. winning 3 straight games facing elimination is a very impressive task. I know we lost Game 7. I know that's all that's going to matter. He made the changes. He managed the game well. And that was important to see. Again, we're talking about a rookie head coach that was thrust in right during media day, pretty much, right before the season starts. He has no chance to implement his own scheme, work with the players throughout the summer in that way. He has to pull himself together, become the head coach that he wasn't expecting to be right now, and guide this team through a weird transition period. On top of that, he's dealing with a coaching staff that is no one on there that he chose, all handpicked by Udoka pretty much, as we see with most of them leaving this summer to go work with him in Houston. The situation he was put in, we all know this, it was awful. Obviously the team was really good, and that combined with his own capabilities sparked a pretty great regular season. There were some on and off moments of greatness, but still, they won a lot of games, they played good ball, and he did a pretty good job. I don't think anyone should be disputing that. If they are, they just don't really understand what it means to be a head coach in this league, especially a rookie at that. Working with very little experience. He did a good job, bottom line. With all that said, that doesn't mean that we can't see more. I expect a lot of growth this offseason. He's got to feel what a playoff loss feels like, what the battle of a playoff series looks like from a tactical standpoint, from a rotation standpoint, what the game calls for, when you need to call timeouts. He figured that out, type of substitution patterns you need. I think he's going to learn from this, and it really helps that with all of those assistants leaving for Houston, Boston has a great chance here to rebuild that coaching staff, one that where he gets to, discuss with Brad. They both get to talk about what's best for the team, the type of relationships that they would like, the type of personalities that they want to bring in here. And they got off to a great start already, bringing in Sam Cassell, a 3-time champion with great NBA experience, a guy that players will immediately respect and take his word how it is. He doesn't have to hold back. Truthfully, that's the exact type of mentality I was hoping this team could bring in. I wasn't sure that Cassell was a possibility, but to bring in someone that, multiple seasons, 20 points per game or close, like a legitimate NBA talent, all-star. He's been around in this league. He's got great coaching experience on top of that. And he won a championship here in Boston. I actually don't think it gets better than that from a standpoint of bringing in a veteran player. There was some talk about bringing in Phil Pressey, who, that'd be a fun reunion as well, but he is certainly not the type of NBA veteran that Sam Cassell was, and I think that matters a lot with these players. The loss of Damon Stoudemire was huge in that regard. Him leaving in the middle of the season, it really took away a voice that the players could lean on and that could be straight with them and not worry about biting their tongue, holding back. They could tell him how it was. And I think a team of players like we have in Boston, really anywhere, they need to be able to hear those things and get put in check from time to time. So I'm pretty excited about this Sam Cassell pickup. Again, I wasn't sure that this would be a possibility, but I think that's a huge start. I don't believe the Celtics are done here. There are plenty of other assistant coaching options out there. Hopefully they can bring in a few more with coaching experience under their belt. Probably not head coaching experience at this point. I guess we'll see what Coach Budenholzer from the Bucks is trying to do this season, because that'd be another pretty huge one if they could convince him to come in as an assistant or associate head coach role. But yeah, aside from that, just more high-profile assistant coaching and good fits for the locker room. And with Joe, is just really important to give him a great support staff right now. As much as he learned, he still needs the right voices in there that can, they don't have to keep him in check necessarily, but be able to tell him straight up, if he needs to look at a different angle of things, right? Adding on to that, tactical changes is another thing that I'm hoping for, looking for. With Mazzulla's system, a lot of stuff was freestyled. I like that aspect of things where it's not always an action that has a strict set of rules. You can branch out of it in a couple of different ways. Whether it's players curling in and then popping out off of, stagger screens or something like that. But I think the problem was that a lot of these actions, the key of them is to generate open threes. That might sound weird, like, how is that a problem, right? But in the NBA, that becomes a lot more threatening if there's a roll to the rim, if there's a cut to the rim that's helping open that up, that the defense actually cares about. A lot of the times the Celtics will have someone cut through in that action, but it's hardly even something that gets looked at from their playmakers, whoever's initiating the action. The goal is just to get that open three popping out, which is great if you get it. We know the value of threes. We know how much the team values the three. In those actions, if you can have someone cutting to the rim with force and with purpose and have the playmaker, the initiator, actively looking for that, it's only going to put more stress on the defense, drag players out of position, and on top of that, it's going to open up those three-point shooters more when they're curling off the screens. So to me, that's something that's massively important for this team to build into their identity. So it's not just this team's so reliant on threes, they can't pivot. They have to be able to pivot. As much as the three is valuable in this game, they have to have ways to get good looks at the rim. And I think this is a good place to start. But I will say, to Mazzulla's credit, I think roster construction has a lot to do with that. In my eyes, this team is built around three-point shooting, and it's no wonder why he stressed that and sort of made this into their identity, as much as people and even maybe the team didn't feel like they wanted it to be that. They wanted to be built around defense. But when you bring in a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, you're lacking sort of a larger defensive wing, a more switchable defense off the bench. It makes sense that the team leaned on three-point shooting to sort of be their de facto identity. Really, that's why, I'll talk about it later on, the biggest roster needs for me are wings and bigs with athleticism off the bench. Those two things would be really helpful in shaping this team's identity into a more diverse offensive approach, where open threes will drag defenders out onto the perimeter, open up the paint a bit for those cutters, for the straight line drives from the corner. This team should have no problem generating shots at the rim and capitalizing on those opportunities. So we'll put that convo to the side for now. The next thing I'd like to talk about, though, is Jaylen Brown. I think a lot of people, this is discussion number one for them this offseason. What do we do with Jaylen Brown? Honestly, most people should know how I feel. It's really simple. Just pay the man. It's not my money. Just pay the man. Truthfully, I get it. I do. I like Jaylen a lot as a player, as a person. And I think the convo has gone a little bit too far in who he is as a player. But I get the concerns. I get the ball handle concerns, the value concerns when it comes to this contract. But truthfully, I just think he is a solidified number two. And finding that replacement, it's a lot harder than people are making it seem. And despite the changes to the collective bargaining agreement, I just think you pay him. And if a trade's necessary, figure it out down the line. But to me, this team doesn't need to shake up the whole core of everything. They've gotten so far with this core in place that they should feel comfortable that a coaching staff fully intact, a full regular season and off season to build on that offense and get more comfortable with it, and some tweaks, some changes around the edges, they should feel like that's enough to bring them right back here. Other teams have plenty to worry about this offseason too, and it feels like that gets ignored a bit. We somehow become the only team with turmoil that needs to completely change the fabric of their roster. I don't think that's fair personally, but I won't get into that. What I will say is that despite Jaylen's shot-making ability, The handle can be an issue at times. The playmaking, it's not always there. And it leads to some ugly moments where he truly struggles. Teams find ways to get him out of his game and he'll start to force things. So I think what it comes down to is hopefully what this contract extension brings is a level of security in his game that he can come back in the offseason next season and think that he doesn't have to force this, that he can play the game that the team needs him to play. I don't consider anyone selfish for trying to get their money, but I would say that he wanted that Supermax extension. He wanted to earn that, and he played a certain way for the season to try and get there. Like I said, I don't think that's selfish. I think it is what it is in this world. He wants to secure that money. But I would hope that with that secured, we can see a more refined Jaylen, more openness, more willing to accepting the role that the team needs him to play. And of course, they need his shot making. They need him to get the offense going at times. But if he can adapt a bit, adjust to what I'm hoping for to see in this offense next season, that'll be really big, and I think would start to quiet some of the trade Jaylen conversations and questions about paying him. So to dig into that a little bit more, like I said earlier, this team needs that cutting element. They need more athleticism to capitalize on the openings that their three-point offense generates, and Jaylen can be a key to that, truly. If you ever watch his connection with Marcus Smart, you see how good of a cutter he can be when that's a priority to his game. Time after time, we've seen those two combine for a backdoor cut, and I don't see why that can't be a massive part of the offense. You know, it doesn't have to be those two necessarily, but there are plenty of opportunities for them to incorporate him as a cutter. And, you know, that's easier said than done, but he has to be willing to accept that is the bottom line. He has to be willing to take on the role as a cutter and allow himself to be less of an initiator when the offense needs that. And I think that's a big key to truly maximizing what we're getting out of Jaylen on this next contract. And I have a cautious optimism that that's something he would be open to. There's no reason that Jaylen shouldn't be a good fit for this team, right? Strong, he's an athletic, physical wing. He just needs to embrace that a little bit more, play that way, be willing to move off ball, be willing to backdoor cut on actions. That's a collaboration that, like I said, it falls on him to be open to doing that. And again, it also falls on the coaching staff to be willing to incorporate some of that stuff as well. Yes, it was there, but a lot of that did lie on Marcus and Jaylen's chemistry to find those cracks in the defense, find those backdoor openings. So I hope that they look at that film and say, yeah, we got something here. That opens up so much more when it comes to your three-point offense as well. If you're actively cutting, if you're rolling, whether it's the bigs or a guy like Tatum, he played a bit of a big man role this year at times when he was at the 4. He would screen, slip to the rim, two-man game with Marcus Smart, whatever it may be. But if him and Jaylen are opening things up with their roles, with their athleticism cutting towards the hoop, that opens up three-point shooters. You know, it helps with the overall spacing, the unpredictability of the offense that Mazzulla is trying to build. And that's where I think this team needs to go. And that brings me to the next part, which I touched on briefly for a moment earlier, is the roster needs with this team. Need number one for me is very clearly wing and big athleticism. It's easy to just simplify things and say, yeah, this team doesn't really dunk a lot. They focus too much on threes. You know, there's some truth in that though, honestly. They have some size, but they're so built on being a perimeter team, both roster-wise and play-style-wise, that they don't get to the rim and capitalize enough on these opportunities. When they get defenses in rotation, they have to have someone in that corner who can take that ball, straight line drive to the rim, catch and go, dunk on some rotating defender's head. You know, they just need more of that. And truthfully, the only place they really get that from is Jaylen and Jason. I'm hopeful and looking at a lot of options here where we can add a big and hopefully a wing or two that can play the type of style that they want, be a switchable defender, hopefully knock down threes, and come in and put a dunk down that energizes the crowd, energizes the team. They're missing that element to this team. I've said it for a while now. But obviously, you know who comes off the bench? Grant Williams, Sam Hauser. None of those guys are rising up and getting posters. Malcolm Brogdon, he's certainly not that guy. As good as he is talent-wise, he's another skill perimeter player. He's going to get to the rim. We've seen him over and over again attack the rim. But he's not finishing above it. And I think that element would go a long way for this team. Another lob threat. Much love to Luke Cornett. We didn't see him at all during the playoffs. Someone more consistent, someone with a similar profile to Rob would be interesting, where he could replicate that sort of role that we have, which has been so important for this team on pick and rolls, drives, opening up the floor. So that's really what I'm looking for here. Obviously, there's a few avenues where we can look to add that, where we can try and find that change. I've speculated on trades with both Peyton Pritchard and Malcolm Brogdon. I know there's a cluster of people that don't really understand the Brogdon trade sentiment, but to me, as good as I think he is, as much as I like him as a player, as much as I thought he was going to be the player that kind of settled this team down and could get them into a calm and relaxed offense in a playoff setting, he was that guy at times, but there was nowhere near as much consistency as they needed, and for him to have such a high usage in this team, I think that could be distributed in other places and to positions that make a little bit more sense to what this team needs. They have enough guard talent, they have the ball handling, and unfortunately, I think moving him is just the most simple way to attain some value here. Get a few players back, one or two, that can truly balance out the roster, make it more versatile, and have more matchups that are actually favorable in a playoff setting. If I was trading Brogdon, the goal would be to get him to a situation that made sense. Like I said, I like and respect the guy. Finding a playoff team for him, hopefully in the West Coast, would be the goal. I don't really see, a lot of rebuilding or fringe playoff teams having too much interest in his talents on the contract he's on, unless it was a type of OKC, Chris Paul, rebuild the value type of thing, trade him midseason, whatever. That could definitely be an option. A few teams that pop out to me just looking through are Phoenix Suns, LA Clippers, New Orleans Pelicans, and the Lakers. Each of those teams to me feels like someone that would be interested in Malcolm Brogdon, whether they need the starting guard talent. I could just see it logically as they look to improve their rosters. They all seem like teams that could use Malcolm Brogdon. But additionally, they also have the contracts needed to make that trade, to facilitate that deal. Whether it is a one larger contract, like if it's the Suns, I'm not sure where my interest is, but Ayton has a big enough contract to make that happen. The Clippers have a number of forwards that you could choose from. They've got the Batums, they've got the Marcus Morrises, the Norman Powells of the world. The Pelicans have a guy like Larry Nance, a few other names they could use to make it happen. The Lakers have a ton of wings and a few bigs that could probably work contract-wise as well, so I'd keep an eye open for that. I don't know where Brad feels about this, where the team feels about this, but personally, I would be open to moving Malcolm Brogdon. That's where I stand. If he were to come back, my hope is just that they can find ways to add one or two athletic, versatile wings off the bench, because I do still think he can help this team. I'm not sure if he's actually interested in a six-man role again. He's been on record saying that this isn't the ideal role for him, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think he sacrificed a lot this year, so as much as I'm open to trading him, I like what he brought this year, but I do think there's better ways to utilize his minutes and his usage in this offense. On top of that, I think a Peyton Pritchard trade is likely. If Brogdon's gone, a lot of people would say, well, then you should probably keep Pritchard around. You want that depth as a ball handler. But honestly, he asked out in a year where this team was an obvious contender, one of the best teams in the league. He was upset about his minutes. He was upset about his role in the offense. And he pretty much openly asked for a trade. I think that the team would just be in their best interest of granting that wish. He's got the talent to stick around in this league, but I can't say that there's a need to keep someone around that didn't want to be here. Maybe that's worth salvaging. I don't know. I don't really think so. I am pretty certain that they could find the players capable of running the offense even better than he could on a similar level of contract. So that's not something that really bothers me too much. I don't know how much value you can get for trading Peyton Pritchard, honestly. I think there'd be some teams willing to bite on him. I theorized a few options the other day. A few guys I like that make similar money are Kenyon Martin Jr., Derek Jones Jr., and Nas Little on the Portland Trailblazers. Those are, again, a few names that are wings with some size or athleticism or a mixture of both that, like I said, small contracts. You could trade them pretty much one for one with Peyton Pritchard, maybe an additional contract on either side. But those seem like options that are at least there's some likelihood that it wouldn't take too much additional value to make it work. So I'd be really happy specifically about bringing in Kenyon Martin Jr. I don't know if Houston would bite on it, but he is one of the best athletes, especially for his size in the league. He's, I believe, 7th in total dunks this season for someone that's about 6'6". He was the only 6'6" or less player, along with Jaylen Williams in OKC, that was top 50 in dunks. So that's something that's really interesting to me, to bring that level of athleticism, someone that can get up, get alley-oops, straight line drive it for a dunk, bring some energy to the game. And I think that's really important, whether it's the end of the bench or your 7th, 8th man. Having someone like that would be really important. Derek Jones fits that similar mold. Nazir Little, he was a pretty highly touted high school college prospect, hasn't exactly panned out, but I think he's got a little bit of game. Each of them has some type of defensive ability that they would be able to adjust to this scheme, so you never know how things will play out, but I do think a Pritchard trade is on the horizon. If I had to guess, they would fulfill his wish of moving on. The last avenue that you can add some talent here is draft options. Boston's in a pretty good place with the 35th pick. It's not a first rounder, but you have similar value there. And there's always the chance in that range of players with legitimate talent slipping out of the first round for whatever reason. But right now, there's a lot of names that make sense for the Celtics as far as wings, again, which I'm looking for with some athleticism and the ability to defend within the system, be switchable. And it's a good opportunity to add some genuine young talent as well. To me, some guys that jump off the page right away are Oliver Maxence Prosper and Jordan Walsh. Those are two wings that I see as very switchable, with each having some athleticism, great length, great wingspans. Prosper is probably my number one at this point. He has a great NBA frame right now. He's 20 years old. The three is a work in progress. He can knock them down. It's not great, but he can knock them down. I'm sure that's something that could look to develop, whether it's just a corner three or, all around. But everything else is pretty great with him from a fit perspective. He is very switchable. He can hang 1v1 and he makes some really good team defense plays. He's athletic. He's got that length that he can dunk on you with the wingspan and with the athleticism combination there. So I see him as a player that feels pretty realistic to be there at 35 as well. There's been some talk about him creeping up into the end of the first round with draft workouts, with combine performance. He's been great. So maybe he's just out of the Celtics range, but I think he's close enough that that's someone we should look out for. Jordan Walsh, another guy, a wing with great length, 7 foot plus wingspan, can defend. He can put the ball on the floor a little bit. He's got some skills there as well. He's not a super old prospect either. So I think those are 2 names that I'm really interested in. I'm going to keep learning more about this class as we get closer to draft time. But I do actually hope that, as much as Brad Stevens likes to trade away draft picks, I hope that they keep this one. It's a good chance to add some talent that actually fits this roster and potentially is playable in year 1 or by the end of the year. We need these cheap contracts as well. If we're going to be dishing out the big bucks to a guy like Jaylen Brown, we got to have rookie scale contracts to make sure that, we can fill out this roster properly. So that's where I stand on that. Like I said, I'm going to keep looking into the draft a bit more. But as far as all of these options go, a Brogdon trade, I don't know how likely I think it is. I don't know where Brad stands on that. I know he's comfortable with the core in general, but whether he includes Brogdon in that, I wouldn't say that's so certain. So I could very much see Brogdon on the move in the next couple of weeks to month. And if that were to happen, maybe they feel like Pritchard should stick around as well. I'd be okay with a Pritchard trade on top of that too, regardless. So we'll see. There's a lot up in the air right now. I do think roster changes will be coming. We've got guys like Danilo Gallinari coming back, hopefully, for next season. That's interesting. We'll see if they keep him around. He is on a player option, so that part's in his control. Whether they decide to trade him or not in a different deal, we'll see. Personally, I'd like to see what he can bring. I was really interested in his skill set on this team. On top of that, you've got a guy like Mike Muscala that they brought in at the trade deadline. I actually think he is deserving of some minutes too if they decide to keep him around. See what they have there. 2 big guys with some shooting ability can never hurt. We'll see, but I think the Celtics are in better position than people realize. It's easy to demand this complete roster overhaul, but this team is right in the fight every single year. I think they have the right mix. It's just about fine-tuning what you have here. That requires an openness from the coaching staff, an openness from the star players, including Jaylen Brown, to modify the approach, be open to making the decisions to build this roster and offense and game plan in ways that are much more difficult to defend and less of a one-trick pony in ways that this reliance on three-point shooting could feel at times. So overall, I like this team. I don't see a problem in saying that. I think they are very capable of winning a championship with this core. I think there are moves to be made though, and regardless of what happens, I'm open to the change, small or big. That brings me to the end of my topics for today. I didn't want to stretch this thing out too far. Wanted to give you guys a look at what this could feel like. Thank you to anyone who decided to stick around, tune in for this. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see. Please leave a comment with some opinions, criticism, whatever you got. I'd be interested in hearing any and all of that. Again, I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.